Hello and welcome to this Year 8 webinar on opinion writing. There are three key learning aims, three key takeaways. First of all, using persuasive techniques. Second of all, understanding audience awareness. And finally, structuring and shaping an argument. And these are all for a specific assignment. Prisons do more harm than good. Now, when we're thinking about opinion writing or argument writing, we really want to pass with flying colours, and PASS stands for persuasive techniques, audience awareness, and structuring and shaping an argument. Now, this assignment is to write an article for your school website. You need to write for or against the statement. So the statement is prisons do more harm than good. Now, if you're for this statement, you may well think that prisons do more harm than good because they're full of marginalized people who aren't very rich, don't have a good education, who are from different races or have different disabilities. This is what happens. They end up in crime and they're in prison. And this is why they do more harm than good. They don't help people to get out of a money trap, or they don't help education. They don't help injustice in any way. And so they do more harm. That might be one of the reasons that you agree with the statement. You might also say that actually they don't provide support. They don't provide support for the offender, and they don't provide support for the victim. They don't help anyone, particularly people who've been harmed. You may well say also that these low-risk offenders, people who just perhaps shoplifted, are exposed to high-risk offenders, so people who have been involved in very serious crime, and therefore they're likely to learn how to commit crime. And you might also say that there's violence everywhere in prisons. They do more harm. They put prisoners at risk of injury. And you may well say that actually instead of having prisons, we should have probation, where offenders have to report, they're accountable to a probation officer, and their lifestyle then changes more. So they may well be some arguments that you would use to really talk about why you are for this statement of prisons doing more harm than good. Obviously, when we talk about argument, we're just talking about the reasons that you have, and making an argument is not having a fight with someone. It's making a case and giving examples and explaining your reasons why you believe that particular opinion or viewpoint. What about the other opinion, the other side of the argument, the other viewpoint? What about if you're against the statement that you don't think prisons do more harm than good? You think that prisons do more good than harm. So you may well say things like, prisons protect society from dangerous and violent criminals. Because they're away from us, then we're protected against them. You may also say that they isolate those who deserve punishment from their family and friends. So they deserve punishment. Why should they have freedom? Why should they be able to socialize and have a lovely time? They deserve this punishment and they should be isolated. You may also say that it stops offenders from re-offending because they're locked away. They can't re-offend, they can't steal again, they can't do criminal damage again, because they're locked away. And you may also say that it acts as a deterrent for certain people who are considering crime. They know that this kind of crime comes with this kind of sentence, and they would think twice about committing a particular type of crime because they know the kind of prison sentence that comes with that kind of crime. So it acts as a deterrent. Or you may also say that actually prisons are doing more good because they ensure that the law is respected, the law is upheld. You do the crime, you do the time. So those are 5 different reasons for the statement, prisons do more harm than good, because you're looking at discrimination and inadequate support and like low-risk offenders being influenced and violence and probation. But there's the other side of the argument. When you're against the statement, you're looking at protecting society and really isolating and punishing offenders and them not being able to offend, and actually stopping people from offending to make sure that the law is respected and upheld. Now, in your descriptive writing, you may choose whichever side, but you need to make sure that you're your writing is persuasive and that you're using a range of different persuasive techniques. And one way of remembering that is deforest. So the D in deforest stands for direct address, we, so using we and us to talk to your readers directly, using an anecdote, which is a story example, which makes it seem as if this is possible and realistic by giving an example. It might be from your own experience or someone else's experience or something from the news or something that's known publicly as a story example. You may include facts, things that are real life information that are true. You may include opinions, but opinions from experts, according to Dr. Jean from the University of Bedingtonshire. So you've got an expert who has an opinion, even though it's an opinion because it comes from an expert, it seems much more credible. Using rhetorical questions, so these statement questions, well, why on earth wouldn't we? Why on earth would we? So statement questions, using emotive language and exaggeration. This is appalling. Using statistics, so number data, and also triplets. Think about these three fundamentals. So all of these are persuasive techniques to really help your reader to adopt and to accept your viewpoint. These persuasive devices show that you are reasoned, you are logical, you've got facts and statistics behind you, you've got experts behind you, you've got real life stories behind you. You're not just naming one thing, but you can think about three different things, and that you can connect with your reader so they really understand that your opinions, your viewpoint, is really valid and convincing. So you get your case across and you're making a strong argument. So it's really important that for this assignment, prisons do more harm than good, that you think about using persuasive techniques. You use Deforest. So persuasive techniques are here. They're really important, but you also have persuasive techniques that you might be using for description, and they're very important. As well as appealing to people's mind and their logical side, you're also appealing to their heart, their emotional side. So we have a different kind of Deforester techniques. So the D stands for description. So you might use really vivid metaphors and adjectives. So you might talk about how prisoners are drenched by a deluge of disgrace and drowning in oceans of shame. So it's kind of descriptive writing that's more emotional. You may also use alliteration as Deforest, a different type of A. Passive prisoners are poisoned by pathetic portions of pity. So you're thinking that pity isn't enough, we need more solid actions. You may be using forceful phrases like clearly, certainly, obviously, in reality, in all honesty, to be frank, without a shadow of doubt. Can you see how these forceful phrases are very convincing because you sound assured and assertive in your opinions? And then onomatopoeia can also be used as a persuasive technique. Perhaps if you're talking about the violence that these inmates suffer unnecessarily, the crack and the crunch of breaking bones, again, may well persuade your readers. Now, what about the other side of the argument and the other type of aphorist persuasive techniques that are a bit more emotive rather than just the logical ones? Justice in courts, justice in the streets, justice in prison. So maybe you're thinking about justice and this idea, and repetition really is drumming that in. It's emphatic for your readers. What about this emotive language? Desperately sick individuals exploiting helpless victims. You're really tugging at the heartstrings here by going kind of over the top. And then similes can also be used as persuasion. Inmates must be made to crawl like aged turtles, shouldering the heavy burden of their guilt. So you're saying that people need to be punished for the crime that they've committed, because that's about justice. And then tricolon, these are parallel words and parallel phrases or parallel clauses that aren't just three different things. It's repeating almost the shape and the structure of the sentence. Every euro, every pound, every penny spent on prisons is worth it. So that kind of idea. So you can use a wide range of persuasive techniques to really present your viewpoint in a convincing and a valid way that makes you sound like an expert. Now let's talk about audience awareness. This is absolutely vital, that you're really aware of who you're writing for. Obviously, this is an article for your school website or school newspaper. So your audience are people who are familiar to you, some of your colleagues, some of your peers, but there are also people who are not familiar to you, people in older years or younger years, and teachers and even parents. So you need to be aware of the audience, that you're not writing as if you're writing a text message, that it's not slang or informal language, but you also need to be aware of your audience in terms of connecting to them. So the first thing that you need to think about is anticipating their concerns, presenting a counter argument. So I understand and accept that some prisons are dangerous for inmates. So can you see that you're anticipating their concern? They're worried that people go into prison and they experience violence. And you're saying, I understand that, I accept that, but the danger for society is far more serious. Can you see you're anticipating your audience's concerns? And yet you're getting your own viewpoints across forcefully and convincingly. Also, being aware of your audience is that implicit agreement. I think teachers and parents do this very well. We all are aware, so you're almost getting them to agree with you without them understanding that they're agreeing with you. We're all aware of the pain and isolation of rejection, which is why we need to ensure that no one suffers this pain in prison. So you're really, again, tugging at their heartstrings, making them agree with you. We're all aware. So they're kind of sharing, agreeing with you about pain and rejection. No one likes to have pain and rejection. And so we need to make sure that prison, they're not suffering emotionally. And then shared understanding. That's another way of really understanding your audience. We've all experienced, what kind of experiences have your audiences had? How can you share those experiences? And therefore we share our understanding, and therefore they accept your opinion and your viewpoint. We've all experienced anxiety and fear, which is why we must support victims of crime by locking criminals away for a sufficient amount of time. So you can see that you're sharing, we've got this shared understanding of what fear is, what anxiety is, and what is the antidote for this, what's the solution? Well, lock them away for a sufficient amount of time. So you can see that they're quite clever techniques. Once you're aware of your audience, once you can use a counter argument, once you can use implicit agreement and shared understanding, these are quite powerful and forceful ways of really conveying your opinions, your viewpoints in a convincing manner. Okay, now for the last part of this webinar, I want us to talk about shaping your argument, and there's a 3-step structure. So you've got your introduction, you've got your main body, and your conclusion. So you're really thinking about the 3-step structure. But within that, within the main body, there are also 3 steps. So in the main body, you talk about because, why do I think that prisons do more harm than good? Why do I think prisons do more good than harm? And then but, so giving a good amount of time to really looking at the other side. But I understand how you feel. So you're understanding the other viewpoint. You're not accepting it fully. And then the solutions. In the main body, you would talk about your own reasons, see the other side, and try to come up with some solutions. So it would look something like this. So you can see that in the article that you're writing for your school website, you have your introduction. And in your introduction, you have your say, use statistics, use an anecdote, pose a question. So you make your introduction quite powerful, quite engaging. In the main body, you would use the because and but and so. So you give your reasons why you agree or disagree with the statement. You'd attempt to tackle the other side of the argument, and then you give some actions or solutions or even compromise. And then in the conclusion, you would write a summary, maybe you'd give some imperatives, call to action, and then perhaps you would start and end in the same place. You've got a really cohesive structure where you can see that you begin and end in a similar way, and it feels like a nice, coherent, shaped argument. Right, let's go stage by stage to look at each of these different sections. So the introduction, as I said, have your say. So you might start with this statistic. Do you know that over 2 million UK citizens are currently serving time in prison? You start off with a statistic, If you're for the statement, you're obviously going to say this is too many people. If you're against the statement, you're obviously going to say that this is good because justice is being served. Obviously, with statistics, you can use them to help to exemplify or give an example of why your point of view is correct. Then you give an anecdote. Last year, my neighbour was a victim of crime. You're giving a story example, so it's realistic and possible and obvious of what's going on. If you're for the statement, you would talk about how the neighbour, despite someone being in prison, wasn't recompensed, it wasn't made whole. Or you might, if you're against the statement, talk about how this is a victim of crime, and for this kind of crime to stop happening, more people must go to prison and be punished. And then posing a question is the why. Let me ask you, does it make sense? Sorry, does it not make sense to detain these repulsive men and women? They can learn their lesson fully and accept why they have to be punished. So that posing question is really that rhetorical question. Let me ask you, and you're kind of answering the question. It's a statement question saying that they need to be punished so they understand the errors of their ways. Or if you are for the statement that prison does more harm than good, you might say, pose a question like this. Let me ask you, how does it make sense to detain these vulnerable men and women when in reality, they must be shown the errors of their ways in a place that does not corrupt them further? So you're saying in this rhetorical question that actually prison corrupts them further and they should be shown the errors of their ways, but not in a prison. Okay, the main body is your because, your but, and so. Now in your because section, you need to think of 3 reasons, ideally, about why you agree that prisons do more harm than good, or why you disagree, why you think they actually do more good than harm. So your reasons might be social. You might think about relationships and families and churches or other places of worship, schools, communities. How is it affecting society? You might think about emotional reasons, about mental health and self-esteem, and is it being increased or decreased? You might think of economic reasons about things being made poorer and richer, are resources being wasted, is time being wasted, or ecological reasons. Are prisons eco-friendly, or should they be more eco-friendly? What's the impact on the environment? And then you might think about extreme cases. So seed is a way for you to really think about some of the arguments for or against the reason why you think the statement prisons do more harm than good is correct or not. But then you need the other part. You need the other side of the argument. So although you accept the other side of the argument, you're going to challenge it. So I accept the other side of the argument. You have to seem reasonable. You have to seem rational in order to be convincing in your opinion writing. I understand, I accept, but you also need to challenge. However, the truth is, challenge the other side. So these might be some negatives that you might challenge. I understand that neither the offender nor the person harmed are given adequate support to heal. However, at least they are in prison and they can do no further harm. I understand and accept that there is a likelihood of learning new ways to commit crimes if low risk and high risk offenders are combined. I understand, accept that. However, someone who spent time in a prison won't want to go back quickly. It is a deterrent. So can you see that although you're accepting and understanding that side of the argument, you're still challenging it. So you're giving the counter argument. What about the other side? Positives to challenge. I understand and accept that prisons do protect society from dangerous and violent criminals. However, the truth is that sometimes they come out more hardened and more dangerous. I understand that prison can be a deterrent. However, some things are crimes of passion. People don't think before they commit these crimes. It's spur of the moment, hot-headed crimes that prison will never be a deterrent for. So can you see that although you're accepting and understanding part of the other side, you're also challenging the other side? Okay, and then the solutions. You might have ideas. Well, why can't we have separate wings for low risk and high risk inmates? Why can't we have ways of making amends to the victim? Why don't we have a society that builds forgiveness? Maybe we should think about the way we treat our prisoners. Perhaps we should look at reforming our system so people don't get away with murder. So this section is really thinking about some ideas, some solutions, some actions that are a bit more practical and down to the ground, or even some compromises. And then in your conclusion, finally, you're summarizing your main reasons. The main reasons why I do think that prison does more harm, or I don't think that prison does more harm. You summarize them. You might again give something practical, and then starting and ending in the same way, that circularity that we talked about before. So I hope that that has helped you to write your own assignment. Prisons do more harm than good, that you write an article for your school website for and against the statement. I hope you use lots of Deforester techniques, that you really think about your audience by anticipating their concerns, using implicit agreement and shared understanding, and that you're really able to structure your ideas using SEED, social, emotional, ecological, economic and dangers reasons, really able to structure a cohesive and well structured argument that's convincing for your readers. Thank you for joining me, and I hope this was helpful.